Good morning from Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester. Panhandle Outdoors, your source for fishing, hunting, and information for folks who enjoy the great outdoors. Now sit back, relax. It's Panhandle Outdoors.
Good morning and welcome to Panhandle Outdoors. I'm Bill Allen sitting in for Winston Chester on this Monday morning. And let's get started with our Haney Technical Center weather report. No rain. Hallelujah. We've had a couple of days and looks like we're going to have a few more days, and hopefully it's going to help clear this water up some. Good strong tides for the last couple of days, and so that'll help too, because we're back in that bad situation. We're going to discuss some of that with our special guest this morning. So the high today is going to be 83 with a low of 66. And again, no rain in the forecast. We got a west-southwest wind forecast at 8. Maybe a little more, usually is. So, but all in all, pretty decent day and good-looking week. Now let's take a look at our river readings. First of all, Apalachicola is, and you can see I ran this chart last week and been using it, but it's been a nice steady fall. Going to be at 9.5 feet. And still it's stabilizing. It's going to come on down a little bit, so great shape there, and those brim and bass ought to be coming out of the trees and up in the woods and should be fat and ready to go. And let's look at Choctawhatchee at Caryville. It's going to be at 12 feet. We had a little bump up there, but it's going to start back down. The rain last week was not as bad as forecast, so I don't think we've got that much coming down the pipe. So both should be in pretty good shape and be a great time to get that boat out and go and try to catch some freshwater fish. All right, we got a very special guest coming up, so let's take our first break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Glad you're with us. I'm here, as most times, with Captain Matt Smith, good friend, a great captain. And it seems like, Matt, the conversation remains the same. Water's dirt.
Good morning,
Dirty's
Bill.
the understatement.
Yeah, it's been a long, drawn out scenario here. I thought we were kind of past. Seemed like we got to a little window over the winter.
Yeah.
Water cleaned up, and it kind of got spring-like, and
Got right.
thought, yeah. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to jinx myself, but yeah, it did. It got good, and thought we were through with the water situation, and of course, as we all know, that's not the case.
So we're back to the burnt coffee, water,
Yep.
and a lot of wind. Besides that, everything's great.
Great.
But you and Justin, you've been actively running trips. You've been finding some fish.
You just doing a lot of moving around, doing some different things than we normally do this time of year, and trying to adjust. That's the only option you have.
That's a good point too. Not just when you're guiding, but going out recreationally. You and I were talking about this on the phone last week or whenever it was. But you have to kind of change your expectations of the trip.
You do. I know I've said on this show many times before, and going all the way back to fishing bass tournaments and all the different types of fishing I've done. I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make as an angler, whether you're just recreational, tournament angler, whatever you're doing, is to set an itinerary of we're going to do this and catch this and do this and do this before you ever get on the water.
Yeah.
I think you kind of really restrict yourself from being able to go out and look at the current conditions, what you've got, and make the adjustments there. Now, it's easier said than done. I mean, we all have our comfort level. We all have our things that we prefer to do, our areas we prefer to fish, but especially under drastic conditions, the changes in the conditions, you really got to have an open mind, and sometimes you just have to get outside of your comfort level.
Which is good for me, because I'm not that organized anyway. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants when I'm out there fishing. And that is so true. You really need to be flexible, because I feel like now you got to cover a fair amount of water.
You do.
The other thing is you have to change your expectation a little bit about, we're going to go out and, catch 10 redfish and 25 trout and that kind of thing. This is this is more of the hunting experience.
That's right. That's right. And we all want to draw on past experiences. Your time. Well, this time last year we did this, or this time 2 years ago, and you just can't do that and realistically have expectations of what's going to happen. So, I think some of the things we can talk about is the adjustments one can make, and then also, like you say, just having that open mind and be willing to adjust.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I know, Greg and I fished last week, in East Bay, and wound up catching 3 redfish, but we did that over, and I literally had about 3 hits. So I mean, we did this over like a 2.5, 3 hour period.
Right.
So one is you got to take time to really enjoy where you are.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And there's some things you can do to increase your odds, but I mean, and that was fine. It actually is a little bit more of a challenge.
It is.
You got to hang with it.
You do.
You got to hang with it. It's just tough.
You certainly do. One of the things is right after that kind of rainfall is it takes a while, I think, for the fish to get acclimated. Oh, yeah. I think it's a period of time. It's such a drastic change that you got a lot of turbidity in the water and all of that change taking place. It's not going to normalize for I'd say about a week, somewhere in there. And then from there, I think what I noticed last year during the summer is the fish did finally adjust to it, and it for the conditions and for the scenario for it being in the middle of July, there was a little bit of predictability to it, but it took me quite a bit of time to go out and really kind of pinpoint those areas because I was limited with my visibility, was not able to see the fish.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You got that, and we'll talk about that later. You can't see them, so you're going to have to do something else. But and I want to bring this up too. And usually Justin's with us, Captain Justin Lee, and I'm glad he's not here this morning to tell you the truth, because I've got to eat a little bit of crow. Mr. Landscape Expert said this grass would grow back, and I was very skeptical. But when you could see the bottom, the grass is coming back.
Yeah, it
is growing back. So good news. The sky's not falling.
No,
it is growing back.
Not yet, and just like we talked about the last time we were on the show, we were talking about the grass, and there's always a silver lining. And if anything, our bay system probably gets a major break from the fishing pressure. And there's a lot of things probably going on outside of what we see. Oh, yeah. And everything finds its place, and it's a natural occurrence. But at some point, it'll get really, really good again.
All right. We're going to take this quick break, come back with some techniques on fishing this dirty water. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look before we get started here at our peak fishing times brought to us by my buddy Mark Coward with Edgewater Realty. The peak time is 3:01 a.m. to 5:01 a.m. Missed that, Matt. Yeah. You should have been up going. And this afternoon from 3:31 to 5:31, which is a great time for a lot of people. And tides, our tide chart brought by Kent Forest Lawn, my other buddy Greg Brudnicki. The high at 12:48 p.m. and a low at 11:53 p.m. So you get a pretty big switch right there. And you got about a little over a foot tide movement. And we were just talking about that, this bigger tides that we've had off of this full moon in May. And it's helping to clean this water up some.
It will. We'll take anything. Anything we can
Anything
get it.
Right now. A little bit of north wind we got last week really helped. So, all right, you mentioned it now. You can't see the fish.
That's right.
I mean, unless you see a big pile of them moving, you still don't know if it's stingrays or whatever it might be, because you can't see them.
That's it.
But other than seeing a tail out somewhere, what do you do, Matt? How are you finding fish?
Well, a couple things I look for. One is I look for any kind of activity. If I get in an area, I want to see movement, and you believe me, you could go here recently and go in a lot of areas and not see any kind of movement.
That's a fact.
I mean, anything. It just, matter of fact, it was so fresh at one point you didn't even smell or feel like you were on the bay.
That's true.
It just felt like being on a lake. But if I get in an area and area now, we talk about not always relying on past experiences. You have to in this type of situation.
True.
You need to say, well, I'm familiar this time of year. I generally would expect to catch fish here, blah, blah, blah. But going into those areas and really, instead of having the mindset of let me get the trolling motor in the water, let me get on the poling platform, and let me really work through an area, you can visually look out across. And if I don't see a lot of activity, whether it be birds, mullet, there's not a lot of bait fish in a lot of areas, but if you don't see bait fish, if you don't see any kind of activity, I think that's, for me, is the first detractor.
That's a sign,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And, Mark calls it nervous water.
Nervous water.
You're seeing a little something different, or just any kind of anomaly, if you will, in the water, or going the other way, be it bait or redfish or whatever. But, I mean, it's not hard right now to find mullet.
No. And the mullet, mullet are always good to be around, and redfish, trout, they'll get around them. And that's always something to look for. And then going back to like what you said earlier, covering water, you're just going to have to cover a lot of water, and at the same time, I think you have to fish areas more thoroughly, slow down, and really work area. When you think about our conditions most of the time and how much our fish rely on the visual aspect of their senses and being able to see, we've all watched a fish run from however many feet to come eat a lure or bait.
Right.
That's just not going to happen in a lot of senses.
True.
So you're going to have to be right in front of that fish, and so although you do want to cover a lot of water, you also want to slow down and really pick an area apart, especially if you see activity or you have a lot of confidence in that area.
And you bring up a good point. You can get right on top of fish now, because
right.
they can't see any better than we. Well, they can see better than we can, but they can't see like when it's crystal
That's
clear.
right.
So, you or Justin brought it up the last time. Don't be stomping around the boat.
No.
Try not to drop stuff
That's
all over it. You really need to be quiet. Now, what Greg and I did the other day, big surprise, it was windy.
Yeah.
So, where we intended on fishing, we decided to go around the other side where we could basically just set up the boat and let it drift us into, the marsh or the areas where we were fishing, and let the wind move us, rather than adding the factor, putting that trolling motor down and sending that vibration through the water, and, just letting it kind of drift us and work with the wind instead of against it. But, and going back, I'm a big fan of I got 4 or 5 rods rigged up when I'm going. They all have something different on them. And when you're talking about working an area thoroughly, we all have our favorites.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the favorite of the fish that you're after. So, you can't over pound like 1 point or something, but, switching up, throwing something different out there till maybe you can find a pattern. And rarely, unless it's, in real good conditions, do we fish this, both of us fish the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. Right. If it's decent and it's first thing in the morning and everything's right, we're going to be out there top water, because I'd rather catch 1 top water than I had 5 the other way.
And that is one we were talking about, the lack of grass. So you don't have the grass to necessarily contend with all the treble hooks on the top water, and then also you can probably fish that top water more throughout the day than you can under normal conditions.
True.
So
very true.
There's a little bit of advantage there.
I've had people tell me, well, it's like you were saying a minute ago, being rigid about something. I said, well, after 9 o'clock you can't fish top water.
That's not necessarily
true. Now look, if I'm still throwing it, they're still hitting. I'm not putting it up because it's 9 o'clock.
Absolutely.
But especially now, we've had cloudy days. This water is dirty, and it's not that they just all of a sudden their diet changes. They're not going to eat anything that's wounded and on top.
Right.
They're not looking up into the sun. So, they've kind of got that filter so you can fish it longer.
Absolutely.
Which I'm a big believer in, because, they rattle. It's a big profile. They make a lot of noise, something to attract.
It's a great search bait.
Oh, absolutely.
You get in an area, and if you're really proficient, say with a top water spook type bait, walking the dog, and you get really good with that, you can cover a lot of water in a hurry. And like you say, there's no more enjoyable way to fish than throwing a top water.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, I picked up one the other day that I hadn't used. It's a little bit bigger bait. It's a head and spook, but it has that the scalloped out front part to it. So, I was using it, throwing it, and you can walk it, and then if you add a little pop to it, it starts popping that water because of that concave nose to it. And I'll tell you what, I caught some trout with it. I didn't catch any redfish. We only caught one that morning. I was fishing it with Mark, but we were both really impressed. Now, I've been impressed not caught anything before, but, it was just a slow morning. Mark did catch a real nice fish, but you could work that a little bit slower. It gave it a little bit more of a wounded look. And I wouldn't use it when it's still or clear. I think maybe it's too much, but when you got a little bit of wind, you got dirty water, you're trying to attract them, it's got a lot of noise. It's a bigger profile bait. Yep. And I really like that front. Years ago I used to use some of those, but it just popped and it just really looked like wounded. It looked like it was wounded.
Well, and May is just a good month, probably the best month to catch a big speckled trout. Most of the big females are ready to spawn for the summer, and a lot of them are feeding up. A lot of them come real shallow, and throwing a big topwater like that is
big time.
As good a way to catch one, I know.
All right, let's go to this break, and we'll be right back. Hey, and welcome back. Got a couple little housekeeping. Really just one. Stan Kirkland sent me the other day. Sent this email actually to Winston, but he had made a comment about snapper season, and I guess he might have been just a little bit off on that. So he wanted me to make sure the right information was out there. So the Gulf snapper season is May 24th through July 14th. And June 1 through June 9. And so I'm not sure what he said, but anyway, he wanted to make sure the correct information was out there, so there it is.
It's a lot to keep up with, all of this stuff.
I couldn't keep
it. Changes,
no way.
And anything you generally ever see in print, it always says, to be 100% sure, because it does change.
Subject to revision.
Go to myfwc.com. Go to a resource and check it before you go out, and at least give yourself opportunity to be up to date. And I think everybody has a hard time with that sometimes.
And I have just a little piece of good news. I had an appointment with the mayor the other day. Of course, it was out at East Bay. That's where most of our appointments take place. But anyway, they have applied and are waiting for the permits from the state. Okay. Not sure how many organizations are involved with this, to begin to work on Carl Gray Park and the boat ramp.
Really?
Okay, yeah, they're waiting. They've submitted it. They've done their work. I know I've had a lot of people ask about it. You can't just grab a bulldozer and go out there and start digging in the water. No. So you got to have the permits. But now they've submitted something. I understand it's really nice. They're going to have some boulders or rocks down that west side to keep that sand from moving in and filling a lot of that in. I don't know the details. But I do know that Greg took it seriously. He got some people out there. They got a plan. They submitted it, and they're just waiting on the approval. And they're ready to go as soon as whichever
the powers
100 environmental agencies have to say that you can take a bucket and to go dig in the sand.
That's good to hear. I think anybody that's familiar with the facility itself, you couldn't ask for a better location. Plenty of parking. And it just I think everybody's understanding that we live in a day and a time, like you say, where you just don't go take a piece of equipment and go do what you want. So hopefully
hopefully they'll understand, see this, and I just appreciate Greg and those guys paying attention to this and doing what they have to do to get this process started.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's go back. Let's increase our odds out there. Now I like to fish. Offshore to me is like 3 foot of water. I don't go offshore anymore. So, we like to, when the tides are right and with the kind of boats we got, get back in those marshes, fish in between there, help feed the sand gnats. Yeah. And but what I look for is all these grass islands, all these little sand islands as you're doing through this, the points. Where the water's moving around them, ambush points, being able to try to fish those effective.
Absolutely, and one thing I noticed last year during the summer, even as warm as it was outside, the water temperature was cooler than normal. The fish got really, really shallow. So that's one thing to look for too. Is typically you can get to a point, especially as it starts to warm up, where you're fishing too shallow. Like you say, you want to back off and fish offshore. Not necessarily the case. Those fish will come up real shallow, and so that's another thing to keep in mind. But moving water, ambush points, and kind of like we talked about, familiar to bass fishing, you can more so run a pattern with the fishing out there, whereas clean, clear water, big expanses of flats, it's totally different things that you look for, and your timing and your areas and where you're going to make your moves. With the water the way it is now, you can, like you say, if you find fish on a point, you find fish in a certain area, you can say, well, I know some other areas, and there's a good chance that you're going to be able to go to those other places and catch fish just the same as you have in those places.
Like when Greg and I fished the other day, and I caught 2 really nice, good-sized fish, and they're already dark again. They're really pretty, but those fish were where they were supposed to be. Now, I threw a whole lot of times where they weren't where they were supposed to be, but sitting in like a little eddy around where there's a point, was one of them, or backed up, into a pool like where there was water coming in, moving from the other side. Those were the kind of casts that we were making. Now, you got to make a lot of noise. You got to put scent in the water.
Yep.
I mean, I know you fish a lot of plastic baits.
Cover water, and like you said, don't be afraid to experiment. But you need to, like you say, you need to make sure that your presentation is being heard or seen, or both if possible. And covering a lot of water, and just kind of always being on the lookout. Any kind of subtle cue as far as activity or movement really gets my attention. And we'll see. You try to be optimistic as far as how long this water will take to clean up and get back to normal. I really don't know. I know we got a clear forecast for a little while here, but I think we're supposed to have.
And over this past year and a half, normal being, I'm not sure what that is. But the familiarity too is if you know an area where you've got some variations in depth. You got a flat that drops to a 3-foot run for a while, or 4 foot, and then a flat, that kind of thing. So anyway, hope you enjoyed today. Hope you picked up some good tips. Do something great for somebody, and we'll see you soon.
God bless.
Thanks for joining us for Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester. Panhandle Outdoors features hunting, fishing, and other activities and information to help you enjoy the great outdoors. Join us next time for Panhandle Outdoors.